Hi, welcome to the All Things LGBTQ interview show, where we interview LGBTQ guests who are making important contributions to our communities.
All Things LGBTQ is taped at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with John Killacky and Dona McAdams, two fast friends of 40 years and both very talented. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk with them together. This is Dona's third interview, and John's been on many more times, or several more times anyway, and he has an upcoming interview where we're going to talk about his current work. But today the focus is on John's documentary about Dona's book. So we have two documents to celebrate today. I've shortened your biographies, which are very, very long, because you're so accomplished. And let's start with Dona. Dona has been making photographs for over 50 years. Her work exhibited at venues such as the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the International Center for Photography, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. It's been exhibited there among many other places. Her books include Black Box, a photographic memoir, St. Lucie Books, 2024, and that's what we want to celebrate today, and Caught in the Act, published by Aperture in 1996. She's the recipient of the Dorothea Lange Paul Taylor Prize from the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke, and an Obie Award and a Bessie Award for her performance photography, and grants from the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation and National Foundation for the Arts and the Vermont Arts Council. Very impressive. Now, John Killacky.
Wait, and one thing to add to Dona, she was named the 2025 Governor's Arts Award for Excellence in the Arts.
How could I have forgotten that?
The top Vermont prize. Dona got it this year.
And I think we could maybe show a picture of you receiving the award. Let's see if we can add that, because it's worthy of note. It's a great honor, John. Thank you. All right. Now, John has created a documentary on Dona McAdams for her book, Black Box, a photographic memoir. And it's been shown in related exhibitions at Vermont Center for Photography, November 1 through December 29, 2024, Pratt Institute's Manhattan Gallery, April 18 through June 5th, 2025, and UVM's Cohen Hall in relation to Francis Colburn Gallery, October 7th through 31st, 2025. Screenings have included at Venetia Soda Lounge, Brattleboro Museum, Cine Slam, Southern Vermont Art Center, and The Current. It's broadcast on Maine Public and Vermont. Very good work, John. And currently, your work is, you've worked with a community of artists to create a meditative reflection on our bodies that have been demonized, weaponized, and politicized. And in this exhibition that you are part of, are cisgendered, trans folks, and queer people and others. So you have many more accomplishments, John, that we will review when we have you on for your separate interview. So.
Well, today we're celebrating Dona, the majesty of Dona and McAdams.
That is correct. Let me ask you how you both happened to create a documentary to accompany the book.
Well, we've been collaborating for a while now, and John has been curating and putting my work, my photography on the wall, and it's such an honor for him to be able to celebrate his work in film and video. So it's like it's a very nice collaboration because it's me, but it's him. So it's wonderful for me to be sharing a frame with him guiding the way it's incorporated.
Well, you know, and we have known each other for 40 years, which is extraordinary because the communities we've shared is very profound. The communities we've lost during AIDS is that we shared that same kind of history. You know, and our art, our politics, our aesthetics are very much aligned, and we both love animals. I have a pony and a cat that you're going to be seeing jumping up on the screen
We
here.
already have seen her.
Yes, she's very present. And you know, Donna and Brad and their goats. But um, I had curated a show of hers. We called it Performative Acts. It toured for 2 years in Vermont. And Pratt Institute got interested in having the show, which was a thrill for both of us. But then it was like, no, you know, Donna has this new book coming out, which is a memoir, and it's an astounding achievement because it really is, you know, over 107 photographs. Donna, I don't know, maybe there's,
Yeah,
um, you know, and it talks about her life. Her early life, her time in San Francisco, her time in New York, her time in Vermont, all these different eras of, and it's so all-encompassing, and it also presented a new side of Donna's artistry in the writing. So what we said to Pratt is, well, we're glad you're interested in the work of Donna and McAdams, but we think there's a better show now because of the photographic memoir. And so they said, sure. Of course, because they were interested in Donna's work as a photographer. So it was easy to do. And then we were putting it together and building a budget. And, you know, it made sense to have kind of a talking documentary about Donna and her work to introduce people to it and have it be part of the gallery installation. So that's really the genesis of it. It was like we wanted to have anyone who walked in the gallery to understand the backstory of these photographs a little bit, and Donna is a great storyteller, not only in the writing, but also in this documentary where she's sitting in her studio and she's telling us the stories of some of these photographs. So it was easy to do. You know, we were like family, so we did it in one day, you know. We of course obsessed about it for months, but we shot it in one day.
because I am very reluctant to have my picture taken. I like to, you know, I don't like being in front of the camera. So I don't think I would have been able to do this with anybody else but John because I trust him so much. And it was I was not an easy, I think I was a little difficult because I was really nervous. But once I sort of sat down and was in my space and I had John and I was looking at him and asked the really good questions, I surrendered. I surrendered to
Well, before we talk more about it, let's look at it. Audience, here is Black Box, a photographic memoir, the documentary.
When you go back in time, when you dig deep into your work, you're often surprised. What was once an exposure, 250 at 8, is now a historical moment of a person, place, or thing. But is that enough? Doesn't what's in the frame need to be a good photograph as well? Time is marked in silver. Time is captured. Time is on your side, or is it? Time does not heal all wounds. Time captured in light keeps those wounds fresh, like the day you made them, like the day you got them. The Leica is a small camera. It fits in my hand, snugly in my hand. And the M2 was the camera that I chose to use in 1974. It was my first camera, and it's still my working tool. I do have other cameras. In the theater, I worked with an M3 and a 50 millimeter lens. But on the street, I often work with the M2, and sometimes now I use an M6. But the camera was the perfect tool for me because it was small, it was intimate, it was quiet, and people didn't really notice it because it doesn't have a big lens or a large presence. So it was easy for me to have it with me all the time. And as a young photographer, Hank Wessel, who was my teacher at the Art Institute, he always had his camera on. And he told us back in the day that if you're not going to have your camera with you, you're going to miss something. So I took that to heart, and I always travel with my camera. I might have it on all day and not lift it up to my eye, but it's part of my personality. It's part of who I am. It's an accessory like a belt or a pair of shoes. I'm really influenced by illustration, black and white drawings. And so the black and white camera, the black and white film seemed to make sense to me. And as I went on, the color was not that interesting to me. When I go out to photograph, I don't really go out to photograph. I go out to do my day. And if I'm going someplace, I have my camera with me. And I'm not interested in setting things up or making people go certain places or do certain things or moving objects around. I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in discovering, having the unfolding happen before me as I walk through whatever activity I might be doing, whatever my day brings. Polk Street, which is where I ended up living after moving around for a while, was in its heyday, and gay pride was starting to become a word, a term, a feeling, a place of being that we hadn't experienced before. Coincidentally, when I was photographing once in Dolores Park, I ran out of film and I went to a camera shop, and that's where I met Harvey Milk, and he pretty much changed my life when he was shot dead by Dan White, along with George Moscone, in the November of 1978. Having moved to San Francisco in 73 and 78, I just felt like I didn't want to live there anymore. Because it seemed like every time you turned around, Joan Baez was singing in the streets for something. Harvey Milk, Jonestown. I had to leave. I had to go back east. In the fall of 78, I took a train to Peekskill and I photographed the Indian Point nuclear power plant. And then when the accident at Harrisburg happened on March 28th, 1979, I decided that I hadn't gotten on that train just as a coincidence, that I had gotten on that train for a reason, and I became very involved with the anti-nuclear movement. AIDS activism, by being part of ACT UP's actions that they had. And also, at the same time, the women's movement was being challenged again. Abortion was being challenged again. So we had two things happening at the same time. Women and men, both vulnerable to health care. And the camera was just a way of putting myself in a situation where I could photograph and maybe be useful, maybe take a picture that could change the way we looked at the world. Most of the time, the pictures just sat in a folder to be discovered later on in my darkroom. One day in the new century, I got a DM from a friend on Instagram. I had posted the photograph, and the friend wrote, "Do you know who that man is holding up the black coffin in the center of your photograph?" I did not, I texted back, though I felt like I did. He had been in silver all this time. "He's a Soto saint," my friend explained, the Haitian-born performer, director, poet, AIDS activist. He danced with Martha Graham. "Great," I wrote back. "I'd like to send him a print, the photograph." "You can't," he replied. A Soto died of AIDS in 1994. He was 36 years old. I started to go out to the Far Rockaways and teaching a workshop. And I noticed that most of the folks liked having their picture taken, but they didn't necessarily warm up to the cameras. So I started to bring in pictures, and I also started to do visual art with them. So we had this hobnob table of pictures that I had made, pictures and contact sheets, edits that they had made, and lots of visual arts material. And then one day in Coney Island, where I worked for almost 15 years, a woman named Jane Smith took a colored pencil or a magic marker, I'm not sure what it was, and started coloring on one of the photographs that I had brought in that day. And that's how the hand-colored photograph series started. And when I was in West Virginia, I was thinking about what I might want to do. And so I joined this organization, and through this organization, I met a tremendous amount of women and started to photograph elder women and men, but mostly women, because women live longer than men. So I photographed Lottie Christian looking out the window in her home place. I photographed Georgie Hurd milking her cows. And that day I photographed Georgie Hurd. She got dressed up to go out and milk cows in the barn, and she had these little white go-go boots on. In 1984, very early in my tenure at PS 122, I photographed a performance called 24 Hours, and it was Yoshiko Chuma and the School of Hard Knocks, and it literally was 24 hours. She started at 8 p.m. and she ended 24 hours later. And I was able to photograph the performances, go upstairs, process the film, and make contact sheets, bring them down, and attach them to the columns at PS 122, which was kind of an amazing experience when you think about that, how much time lapsed and how people were so tired at the end of 24 hours, but still really energized. And in the course of my time there, I photographed, my friends, Tim Miller, John Byrne, Beth Lapidus, many, many people. But then I made new friends. I made new friends because they were in the community and they were performing. So I was very fortunate enough to be able to finally meet and photograph Meredith Monk, who I had heard sing at St. Mark's Church way back in 1978, whose performance completely changed the way I thought about the live arts. I was the photographer who photographed the NEA4. Karen Finley, Holly Hughes, Tim Miller, and John Fleck. The NEA4 were just a few of the artists whose work was being challenged during the culture wars. There were many, many others. There was a lot of artists who were on the peripheral of PS 122 that didn't necessarily perform there, but still were my friends. But this particular group of artists, this particular case, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we lost 8-1. When I met Brad Kessler, and we started living together in my apartment on 9th Street, 348 East 9th Street, he was really unhappy. He didn't really like the city. He was more of a country guy. And so we started to think about where we could go that would enable us to still maybe be in New York so we could work and make money, but be far enough away so that we could do something else. The guidelines for us finding a place was that it had to be a dead-end road, cat-safe road, and Brad needed to be able to go outside naked. Those were the searching features that we were searching for when we were looking for a house. And the goats didn't really show up until 2005. And Brad wrote a book called Goat Song. And I remember when the book came out in 2010 or 11, people said, well, are you going to get rid of the goats now? Because, you've created this project and you've got a book now. And I kept thinking, why would we do that? We love the goats. I met a woman at a place called Chestnut Ridge in Center Cambridge and started a relationship with Amy LeBaron as her student on the back of a horse. And then eventually she brought me to the racetrack where I started to photograph the backside of the Saratoga racetrack. I started as a hot walker so I could learn about the labor of the racetrack and have a sense of what happened on the backside of the racetrack. It's not very often in your life that you get to meet somebody as fabulous as Maurice Sendak. And it's not very often in your life that you actually get to create something with him and his caretaker, best friend, kind of daughter, Lynn Caponera. And that's exactly what we did in 2009, was to come together and figure out how Maurice would be able to mentor young illustrators in the same way he was mentored by Crockett Johnson and Ruth Krauss in their little house in Connecticut. And so we set upon ourselves to do that. And in 2010, in the fall of 2010, the Sendak Fellowship started with 4 artists. I started to write these stories. from my joyous youth in Lake Ronkonkoma. And then as this project of the photographic archive continued, I decided that it would be interesting to maybe put the stories with the photographs. My camera's a black box. As a photographer at Performance Space 122 in New York City, I worked in a black box. A black box is a place that holds secrets. The black box in an airplane is what they look at or listen to or try and find when a plane goes down. A portfolio box is a black box. So my darkroom is a black box with an amber light. So it made sense to me that that's what it should be called. The black box, the revealer of the truths.
So how did you decide what to include? That's my first question about the documentary.
Well, it was easy because we've known each other, and then we worked on this one exhibition. Then we already knew what the book was.
But
And
there's a lot more in the book I discovered to my great interest and delight. Not that the material of your show isn't great, but there's so much more.
well, we crafted it together. We talked about what would be some of the good stories from the early years, from the San Francisco years, from the New York years, and
Mhm.
from the Vermont years.
And then, of
And
course, we had to go in the goat barn.
we had to
Right.
have the goats, of course.
Uh-huh.
And then what was lovely about it is we came up with the framework and we looked at the questions and then we just did it, and then Donna gave me access to everything. And it was, you know, there were no curveballs in it. It was things we had all talked about, and it's what she talked about. It was her stories, not my stories.
And
And
then
what-
John had the idea that so we're in my dark room, and John had the idea that it might be interesting for me to pull a print, to process a photograph and film it. And we weren't sure if we'd have enough light, if it would work, but we thought, well, we'll just try it and see how it is. And it's very great. People love being able to see that. And
It works beautifully.
yeah.
There's no chronological structure in the book or the documentary. And I think that's very creative. And the person who wrote the afterword also commends it. But how did you happen to choose that non-chronological structure?
The lack of structure, or well, because we like improv.
Conventionally in a memoir, you go from birth to death, right? Happily, you're still alive, but there's no, it jumps around in time, which is wonderful and very creative. How'd you happen to decide to do that?
Well, because the stories and the ditties, the stories and the photographs just were spontaneous. So if I'm working, I don't necessarily have a photographic narrative arc of time. I have pictures that I've made over 5 decades, and they're here. And at this stage of the game in my life, I'm starting to look at my archive in a serious, like, what am I going to do with it? Where is it going to go? How can it serve the community once that I'm gone? How do I guarantee access to the people that are in it, specifically the performers that I photographed for 20, 30 years? And so I had that. But at the same time, I was just reflecting on, my life and things that I experienced. And my brother, Tom, was always the one who kept things. He always was, he kept the facts. He knew everything. He remembered everything. And he died. So I'd been writing these stories for a long time, and I just sort of, I'd be in the darkroom, and it would be between, if I was printing and I was working, and then I needed a break because I just needed to think about what I wanted to do. Yes, next. I always had a white, like lined piece of paper and a soft pencil. And I would just sometimes jot some things down. And I had been doing that for a while. And then the jotting became more serious, just in terms of not a practice, because there's no rhyme or reason in how I work, even photographically. I never have a plan. I just sort of go out with a machete and bushwhack my way through things. So the stories were there, the pictures were there. And as an experiment, I just decided to throw some stuff up on Instagram, pictures and little stories. Maybe they went together, maybe they didn't. And so when we were figuring out how to do the book, it started, with a photograph that my father took of me in 1955, but I didn't really feel a need to have them have such a clear-cut relationship. I didn't feel that the stories, the ditties, needed to be captions for the pictures. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And also, if you look at the book and there's like a story and it says Itchy Dress 1961, and there's a photograph next to it of Melbourne, Australia, of a little girl against a fence, and that's 1978. We were thinking about how we would organize that, and I thought the best thing to do would just be to give a timeline to the stories. Leave the photographs alone. So it's sort of chronological, but it also really isn't. And I don't necessarily care that they have that kind of like exact this. They're friends, they're partners, they meet together, they have a relationship,
There's a beautiful pairing that Donna has in the book of when you went in high school. The ditty is about you're going to, I think, a field trip at the museum.
Oh, yeah, old pictures, yeah.
Why don't
I was going to ask you to read that.
That would be great. And then you can show, if you have the photograph, you'll see that it's not paired with it, but it's a perfect pairing for the memoir. But
I didn't, sure, we can show the photograph, and I have a lot of questions following from that, John. So let's just jump right in since you mentioned it. Would you mind reading it on page 66?
Old Masters, 1972. My senior year of high school, we had a class called Cultural Coherence, taught by a man with a PhD, not a mister, but a doctor. The doctor wore turtlenecks and sported a devilish black beard and smelled like amorous cologne. I know because I asked. Our class met once a week for the entire year. For 2 hours each Friday, we sat at a long table in a windowless room filled with art books. We looked at slides of the old masters projected on a screen. There was a record player and a pile of classical albums. We were mostly girls in the class, including my best friend, Karen. We were free to come and go to the room whenever we had time, and all we needed was a hall pass. There were no assigned seats. In June, we took a field trip to the Museum of Modern Art. Our assignment was to write about a work of art we found there. I was planning to write about Van Gogh's Starry Night or Magritte's The Menacer Assassin, but I found myself in the gift shop surrounded by books and a photography book by a woman called Diane Arbus, who had killed herself the year before. She was going to have a show there in the fall, and I couldn't get the images out of my head. On the bus back home, I told the doctor I wanted to write my paper on Diane Arbus and her photography. You can't, the doctor said. Photography is not art.
That is so cool. And I have several follow-up questions for you both, unless you want to say something, John.
well, I think the viewers will see this photograph, but the pairing of it is so inspired. Why don't you describe the photograph, Donna, and then
you
give my
talking
response.
about this photograph?
No, the other one, the girl, the Rodin,
The Degas.
Degas.
Right. Where is that? That's next to the cheerleader. Now we're gonna have a little. Oh, here we go. Yes.
What page?
It's the Degas on page 68.
Okay.
So what I love about this, here the photographer, the teacher saying photography is not art, and here Donna is in a French museum, and she's having a docent, a female docent, talk about this Degas sculpture of the little ballerina, and women watching women, and Donna as a photographer artist watching the women. I mean, it's such a great photograph. And there she is in that little room. I don't know, how long were you in that room to get that photograph?
Well, I saw the so the
We'll show it. We'll show it.
the dancer was she's in a glass box. Now the dancer, there's several of them. There's one in Washington, there's this one, and I'm very fortunate because there's one at the Clark in Williamstown, and that little dancer she's not encased in glass. She's free. Well, you can look at her without any reflection. But this little dancer was in a glass box. And so I had this wonderful reflection that I could work with. And if you look closely at the photograph, I'm really lined up with her. John could tell you what position she's in. Maybe I don't know what it is. So I sort of had myself there. I had myself in the glass box. I had the reflection, and I just was waiting for, sometimes you just wait, you wait for the right moment, you wait for light. And I was just waiting for something to happen. And then this group of people came in, and I stood where I was. And the thing that I was the back, I was behind her. So I wouldn't have been able to do this if I was in front of her, because people wanted to look at her from the front, not necessarily from the back. But I just waited there, and then they all kind of came around and started to talk. And I mean, I love being able to photograph, make art about art or in an art space, like in museums. I don't very often succeed at it, but I do it a lot. And that made me happy that I was able to sort of have the dancer, have her in this little box, and then have all the reflection and have the docent. So it's women looking at women. And then I think there's one guy maybe passing through the frame. So yeah, old master.
The questions I have are, do you think this prejudice against photography still exists in the art world? And have you seen traces of it? And following up with that, for you both, who are your favorite photographers?
Well, I think that sometimes when we talk about, if people say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm an artist." Sometimes I don't always say I'm a photographer. It depends. Sometimes I'll say that, and then it's just clear what I do. But if I say I'm an artist, then it's always, "Oh, are you a painter? No. Are you a sculptor? No. Are you a dancer? No. Are you, they go through the checklist, and usually, maybe sometimes they get around to it. More and more they get around to it. But then I'll say, "Oh, I'm a photographer." So, I think that the stigma, or not the stigma, but photography as seen as illustration, as opposed to being able to stand on its own as a work of art, that doesn't happen so much anymore. And for me, I'm really not interested in being the illustrator for other people's projects, which has been my role for 40 years, where people, I photograph dance and performance, so I photograph the performer, and then my document becomes the evidence, the illustration of the work. A lot of times people will write, and they'll want a picture to go along with what it is they're writing. And, but not very rarely does somebody, less and less, but very rarely do people actually say, "Oh, I'd like to see what it was like for you to experience the culture wars as a photographer," as opposed to seeing who it was that you photographed who was experiencing the culture wars. So, and now now I'm in the situation where if people ask me for that, I'll say, "Well, I'm not really interested in illustrating I don't want to do that. I want you to know what it was like for me as an artist." So,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that. And it's illustration across the board, like even picture book artists. When I was friends with Maurice Sendak while he was alive, and he would always come across that too. It's like, oh, I'm just an illustrator. Oh, I'm just a kitty book artist. I just, I'm sorry, but if you look at illustration historically, I mean, it's as significant graphic on paper as silver on paper. So but that used to really annoy me, but at this stage of the game, okay. Whatever.
Favorite photographers. John, do you want to add to Donna's comment, or?
Well, it's lovely to hear her talk about this, but for me, my experience with Donna and McAdams is when I would go to PS 122 in New York, which was the place, and she was the house photographer there for 28 years, I think it was. But I would always see her on the floor photographing the artist because she never stages shoots. Sometimes dancers, they have photo shoots and they work to look on perfection. And that's not what this was about. Donna was embedded into this action of it. And so the photographs that I remember of the Karen Finleys and different people, I have Donna in my brain as well as being part of it. And so to me, what distinguishes Donna's performance work, which has won Bessie Awards and Obie Awards, and the first book you mentioned was all about that. And her political work and her kind of community-based work she's not the outsider. She's not setting up these shots. She's not framing the stuff. She is a participant in the action. And it's the deep empathy that Donna has that distinguishes her. So, most photographers set up this more formalistic thing that doesn't speak to me in the same way. I would say a photographer I also love, and I think it's because of his empathy, and it was a shared community that I knew many of the people, was Peter Hujar.
Uh-huh.
That I always felt we were among friends when Peter was doing stuff, and he, even Candy Darling, which is a very famous photograph, she was dying, and she said, Peter, I want to look fabulous, come photograph me, literally on her deathbed. And so Candy got all dolled up, and there it was. And it was a sympathetic, beautiful, intimate portrait of a friend. It wasn't a drag queen done up on her deathbed. It was, but so empathy is big for me, and with photography, and Donna's right up there.
Any names, Donna, that you want to share?
Well, I mean, on my list, I have Peter Hujar on the top of my list, and I would say that the way he photographed animals, I mean, ducks, and just any sort of, it was exquisitely beautiful. In addition to his portraits of people, a lot of the people were my friends. So I would say yes, and it's wonderful that he's getting to have some recognition now. It's unfortunate that it didn't happen while he was alive. I would say Tina Modotti, who was an Italian photographer who worked photographing Mexico. Of course, Stian Arbus was a very, very important influence for me as a young artist, young photographer. And I would, I'm very lucky because St. Lucie Books, Mark Alice Durant, who is the publisher, has put me, because I'm part of this group of photographers now, I've gotten to see a lot of work that I didn't necessarily know before. So there's a whole group of photographers now that who are part of this St. Lucie family and whose work I've become familiar with. So that's been really, really gratifying to sort of see different work that I would not have necessarily seen before. So,
you mentioned Joanna Howard, who writes the afterword, says that your book expresses the female gaze, and you mentioned that earlier when you were describing the last photograph. Another exemplar of it, I think, is the photo Yvonne on Route 80. It might reflect that idea, and I was wondering if you would mind telling us a little about that photo as we look at it.
So it's Yvonne with the, is it the Yvonne with the woman sign? She's
Yes,
standing.
yes, yes.
All right. So Yvonne Owens and Yvonne is my muse, and she's been my muse since I met her. I was 20, she was 22. We were
She's
both,
in a lot of the photographs, and you thank her in the book.
well,
I'm glad to hear about her.
we were both dental assistants in an office in Daly City, and we were both, I mean, she knew a lot about art and painting. I didn't necessarily know that. So she was one of my early subjects in terms of models. And we did a lot of cross-country trips back and forth together. So that was probably, I don't know, I think we were coming back from the East Coast to the West Coast. And sometimes when I was with her, I would just say, you know, Yvonne, you know, would you go stand next to that motorcycle over there? Or Yvonne, can you just go like go stand by that woman's sign? And she'd be, yeah. And in the juggling photograph at the Turkey Point nuclear power plant, Yvonne's one of the women in that photograph, as well as Leslie Baxter, the three of us. So she was in my 20s and into my 30s, was a very, very important collaborator with me. And we together explored, looking at women, me looking at her, us looking at other women. So she's a very, very important person to me. And we hadn't been in communication for many years. And then we were able to connect again on, what happens with social media. All of a sudden, oh, people show up, and you just think, where have you been? And we hadn't talked, but once we sort of started talking again, it was as if it was like yesterday. So, so she's really an important person to me on many, many levels. I mean, I adore her. I love her. So, and she's a wonderful writer too.
Oh, really?
And you two are going to be collaborating on a new project, right?
Oh, you are? Tell us.
Yes. So we're working together on a project called Searching for Sheila. And what it is the iconic Sheila Nagig, which is something that it's early iconography and imagery and statuary, actually, of that we're going to, they're in Ireland, they're in England, they're in Scotland, they move all around. They're all over Europe, but also this particular imagery is everywhere. When I went to Puerto Rico 2 years ago, the stones were standing stones, and the imagery was this small sort of woman, person, creature squatting down. And the classic is that they're pulling their vaginal lips open. And so that's a Sheila Nagig. PJ Harvey has a very famous song called Sheila Nagig. So some people know what a Sheila is, some people don't. In fact, the Irish expression, if you're called a Sheila, that means you're loose.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And she's she's a Sheila. Yeah. So I'm going to go on a journey looking for these, but the journey isn't necessarily, I don't need to it's about the going along, exploring feminine energy in the same way Yvonne and I explored nuclear energy when I did the nuclear survival kit in the 70s and into the 80s. She came with me on that journey. So we're going to look for, instead of looking for hyperbolic natural draft towers, we're going to be looking for stone pussy.
And there's going to be photographs and text?
I think, yes. She's going to do a very scholarly essay. And I'm not exactly sure how my text will manifest, or if it will, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, here's a fun thing for me about listening to Donna about this. You saw in the documentary, even when she was at the Art Institute in San Francisco, She carried her camera with her like an accessory, she says. And so what's fun about this is her Leica will be with her, and it's not about necessarily these statues. It's about the journey. And
Right.
so who knows, when Donna photographs, she's been for 20 years at the backstretch of the Saratoga racetrack with her camera every season she's back there. And so the stories she tells there are very different than if if you and I, Ann and Linda, were betting on the other side of the racetrack. It would be an unseen world that
Mhm.
she's really documented. So it's this journey she does with this Leica camera, which is the glory of what Donna Ann McAdams does.
And the other thing about Sheila and the gigs is that the Sheila and the gig it's in nature. So John's talking about the backside of Saratoga racetrack. So I found this picture. This is, you can see what that is.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a tree on the Oklahoma training track. So you never know where the Sheilas might be and how they present themselves in nature, in stone. And it just having to be walking around, and you say to somebody, "Oh, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z," and then you have a conversation, and then they become maybe part of maybe you spend time, maybe you photograph them, maybe they take you somewhere. It's a journey. It's a journey. It's a walkabout. It's that's what it is. It's a walkabout. So
That's fabulous. Go ahead.
And it was so much fun at the Vermont Center of Photography, at the Pratt Institute, at the UVM galleries right now where this work is currently showing, to watch people walk into the room thinking they know Donna's work. Whether it's the performance work, whether it's the agitprop work, whether it's the animal work, and it's sort of like, wow. Even her New York friends, because this was her first retrospective in New York, and it's a big deal, right? But all of her performance people for 30 years have known that work, and they were like, they were just scouring the walls, amazed. Like,
Because
how did I not know this about Donna, all these other parts of her? So I
they
think,
weren't represented that well. There was only 5 pictures of performance at that show.
I know.
5 photographs,
Well, I had the same experience reading the memoir. It was like, because I've seen your work and you've been on the show a couple of times, when it's a whole new world.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when we were editing this book and I was working through the photographs and the stories and the texts, and Mark Mark said, well, and in my vision I didn't have any performance, and he said, I said, and he said, no, you can't, you have to have that. You have to have that. It's incredibly important, not because it's what you're known for, but because it's good. So of course, he wouldn't tell me what to do. He just said, why don't you think about that? What it would be, who they would be. And, I mean, I have a few ideas. So he was right. He was right to,
And despite me hinting frequently about a particular photograph of amazing performance of Ethel Eichelberger, who was playing the accordion, the strap broke. So Ethel went over to the piano, and Lori Side had to grab a piano stool and put it down. And you see Ethel there sitting down, and Lori, it is, to me, the penultimate Donna Ann McAdams capturing the gestalt of something.
he's right. John's absolutely correct. That was a mistake.
But not in the book.
It isn't, no.
But
It's
in performative acts.
Yes, it was.
We
No,
met in our last
John is
interview.
absolutely correct. And I will, the next time, in my next show, it will be there.
It was fun to watch for me also to learn about Donna's work in this book. I mean, it's an artist mining her archives and being able in her own lifetime to write the narrative of her work versus 30 years from now, like a Peter Hujar, who we love and we talked about, but it took 30 years for the Morgan to show his work. So and it wasn't through his eyes, it was through curator's eyes. And this is through Donna's eyes. And so it's really just incredible.
Now that we're drawing to a close, let me quickly ask you, what's on the agenda in the near future?
Well, I just happen to have a new book coming out with my husband, Brad Kessler, called The Woodcutter's Christmas.
Really? Tell us about it.
So it's a story of a woodcutter who lives in Vermont. He cuts Christmas trees, he brings them to New York, and one Christmas he stays behind, and 2 days after Christmas, he sees his picture, his trees on the streets and becomes very sad. So it's about homelessness, it's about loneliness, it's about Christmas, it's about what Christmas means to you and finding meaning in Christmas. So
That's wonderful.
And
you're-
you have how many photographs in the book, Donna?
I have oh gosh, I don't know, 16.
16. Yeah.
Sorry about that, team.
No, it's kind of a wonderful collaboration between you and Brad. It was an earlier book like 20 years ago, and now it's been republished. You refreshed it. Brad rewrote it. You added new photographs.
Makes me happy. There are 2 spreads where you have pictures, like a classic picture book. So
Wow.
yeah, it's
Photos and text, right?
It's story, and I've illustrated with Christmas trees and Christmas.
And you're going to be promoting it?
Yeah, both of us will be promoting it. Brad will be reading from it. I will read from it. Here's our house.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow. That's
Ooh.
great.
Okay, but I'm going to brag a little bit because you two live simply in Sangate with the goat farm. But Barnes & Noble has already ordered 6,600 copies of this book. So it's a big deal, and our Donna, there she is again, changing the framework of everything.
And John's also in the forefront of everything going on. We'll talk at greater length with him when he comes on this show. But one more, anything you want to add, Donna?
No.
All right. This has been great fun. Let's do it again.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember, resist.